Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Andy Campbell and this is 12 and a half minutes, brought to you by Elevator, one of Scotland's leading entrepreneurial and business support organisations. We broadcast every week, Friday at 3 p.m, so you can follow us on social media, Facebook, YouTube and LinkedIn. And thanks very much to everyone who's recently got in touch with us to say how much they've been enjoying the programme. It's great to hear such positive feedback. 12 and a half minutes, it's a short form format, but it seems that time slot is just about enough time to allow you to tune in and get some weekly inspiration, and we're delighted that you've been enjoying the programme. So each week I do get to spend 12 and a half minutes in the company of some really inspiring individuals. Some of them are really quite ordinary people who have achieved extraordinary things in their life. And many plan it out. Many have a vision of what it is that they want to do. They work hard towards that and they reach the success, or they reach the goals that they're aiming for. But what if life has a slightly different plan for you? What happens if the unexpected comes along? Well, I guess in most people's lives, these things might just bump us in slightly different directions. But what happens if it's something really serious? What happens if it challenges you almost to the point of death? How would you respond? How would you come back from that? What would you do to better your life if you were given a second chance of survival? Well, my guest today has faced that challenge. And from a near-death experience, undergoing a quadruple amputation, she went on to set up her own charity, raised over £1 million, and is Scots Woman of the Year. So I'm delighted to welcome onto the programme Dr Cor Hutton.
Hello.
Good afternoon,
Hi.
Cor. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, it's an absolute pleasure, Cor, and we do invite some brilliant guests onto this programme, but, each have their own special messages to put across, but yours is a really inspiring story, Cor.
Thank you. It doesn't feel like that to me. It's just, I guess, as you say, the hurdle that I came upon and what I had to deal with in order to get life back.
Well,
so it's not really special to me.
Well, what we're going to do, Cor, is we're going to give you a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, to tell us a bit about that story, where you found yourself and the journey that you've been on for the last 6 or 7 or so years. And then we'll dig into some questions. So over to you now, Cor.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've got to go back 7 years now in June, where I was a busy working mum with my own small business. I did vehicle graphics. And just over the fortnight period in June, I'd had a really bad cough that wouldn't go away. Took myself to the doctors on the Friday. So 2 weeks on, I thought, enough, I've got a chest infection. And he agreed with me and gave me antibiotics. But the very next day, I was dying in hospital, dying with sepsis, which I think a lot of people should be aware of now. We've done so much to increase knowledge of sepsis, but certainly didn't know anything about it at the time. And it looked like everyone was saying bye-bye to me, and my family had signed the organ donation register, and this was serious. Difficult for me to, I guess, get across, because it sounds like I'm telling a story, and also I was unconscious through most of it. What had happened was my chest infection had turned into pneumonia. Pneumonia had linked up with Streptococcus A that lives in us all, and the two together had caused sepsis, and it was shutting down my organs and wanted to try and kill me. I was very lucky to be saved by a machine called the ECMO machine, which basically gave all my vital organs a rest, and the machine did all the work for me. The downside to ECMO was that my hands and my feet had gone completely black, and they were dying. So I remember my mum had said to at one point she was praying for any part of me to be savable. But in the end, when you've lost your hands and your legs, it's hard to believe that it was worth saving. So fortunately for me, my family bullied me to set up Find Your Feet charity in order to fill some of the gaps we'd identified. I think that's big for you guys. We'd identified a need. There was no other charities doing what we were doing. Nobody that could tell me what it was going to be like. Nobody that could encourage me back to life and to try and get my own life back. So that's what Finding Your Feet do now. We have about 60 clubs a month, and we normally would encourage people out of isolation, come along, laugh with us, cry with us. It's not a lot of crying, actually. It's mostly all banter, and hopefully get back to doing what's important to you.
Thanks so much for that overview, Cor. And we do talk about ordinary people who do extraordinary things, but you were really put into a situation where you had probably less than a 5% chance of living, and to come back from that, I guess, with a price to pay. Having losing your hands and your feet, it was a tough challenge for you to come back from that, not just physically but mentally. Could you give me an insight into what was going on inside your mind at that time, Cor?
Well, I think for me and also the family, it's absolutely the most bizarre thing that you can be fit and healthy. One day I was no angel, but I looked after myself. I was fit, enjoyed a little drink, wasn't wild with it, didn't do any of the really naughty things. But and all of a sudden you can be struck down like that. You tend to think most things come with habits or bad habits or an accident, or it just completely out the blue. It was a huge learning curve.
Yeah, and I think, clearly, the doctors were very honest with you. They told you what your chances of survival was, but that, you turned the corner. You talked about the service that you received from the NHS, and the obviously losing your hands and your feet would mean major changes within your life. What were the initial big challenges that you had to get over after being a quadruple amputee?
Well, I suppose at first there's the mind game. You're told about it before it happens and before you can do any recovery anyway. So at that point, you start to think, I'll never feel the sand between my toes again. And oddly enough, I'll never wear a flip-flop, which still turns out to be one of my biggest downsides to not having any feet. I would love to wear flip-flops. But the real practicalities, I had a 4-year-old who needed a mum. I didn't want him to have particularly disabled, immobile mum. I wanted him to have a mum that taught him things and encouraged him to be the best he could. So that really is what drove me.
Yeah, and you've talked about that with us. You've shared that the fact that this happened out of the blue. You had your son there. You had to be a mother to your son, but then your family, your brother, your mother, all rallied around you to getting you through this, and you founded your charity out of that need, as you say. You realised that there wasn't an organisation that provided what you needed, I guess, at the time. So you chose to set up the Finding Your Feet charity. So tell us a little bit about the aims of that particular charity, Cor.
Well, initially I thought I could be just a bit of peer support. I could, I would take people for a coffee. I would try and cheer them up, try and tell them what was coming. I started to go to hospitals before amputations, maybe straight after, and do that part that nobody had done for me, was just to be able to tell you what was possible, maybe give them a bit of hope. I try very hard not to put my interests and my beliefs onto other people. What's important to me won't be important to other people. So I just wanted to be able to, encourage them and let them know it was achievable.
Yeah, and education clearly is a big part of what you do. You mentioned sepsis. I very sadly lost my own father to sepsis, so I know how challenging and tough that can be in getting the education out there on sepsis, but also in terms of perception of amputees. That's something that you've been working hard on. Can you tell us what you find out there, where the perceptions are perhaps not as good or as correct as they should be, Cor?
Yeah, sure. In the beginning, I was desperate to get legs that looked real. That was really important to me, that I had ones that looked real and nobody knew that I was disabled. And I've gone full circle now. Some of the amputees, troopers, we call them, the troopers that we work with, they're out there with pink tartan legs and skull and crossbone legs, Rangers, Celtic, whatever, and showing their personality through their legs. And that's become really important now, and that is changing perceptions. We work with the Scottish Government on quite a few things, from sarcomas and sepsis and situations for disabled, trying to improve that as well. But there's so many different ways you can become an amputee. A lot of people think it's unlikely for them, but 40% of our amputees are diabetic. Living with diabetes, and that's massive. So really, it's possible for anyone, and we'd really like to educate people to try and avoid it where possible. Or should it happen, then let's help them recover.
Yeah, and you provide that support. You mentioned, lots of laughing, maybe a shoulder occasionally to cry on as well. You provide that support, you provide that education, and all of that takes a huge amount of money. And you've been so active, Cor, and I think you probably play it down in terms of the amount of work that you've done to raise a huge amount of money, and some of the things that you've done, from ascending Ben Nevis to then going on to Mount Kilimanjaro, to then going through a triathlon. There's been some amazing things that you've been doing. What have been some of the highlights or the biggest challenges that you faced in raising the money?
Well, I set myself a goal of doing one big challenge a year, which wasn't that different, to be honest. I would always have been like that. But Ben Nevis happened by accident, to be honest, where I said I would go and encourage a friend and I would walk a bit with him, and ended up doing it all as well. So that was a bit of a surprise. The London Triathlon was particularly horrible. I was quite confident about that, swimming in the Thames, but the day of the swim, they gave me a brand new wetsuit, and it completely changed my position in the water. Ended up near drowning in the Thames, which wouldn't have been a good report. But I think it's fraudulent to say I would do all these things for finding your feet. A lot of them I do for me. It's important to me that I'm doing things that other people never expected me to do. It's important to me that they think, yeah, well done you. But it always has a spin-off for Find Your Feet. It always allows me to tell people about Find Your Feet. And, Kilimanjaro, yeah, biggest mountain, standalone mountain in the world. And fantastic to be the first female quadruple amputee to do it. But for our troopers, just being able to get out of bed in the morning is a massive mountain. Just be able to come to our clubs or pick up the Zoom or the phone at the moment during lockdown is massive for them. So just encourage them to come out their comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, really that's hugely inspiring. As and as you say, each individual has their own mountain to climb. So it's great that you've been able to have a platform and make your own platform to be able to shine a light on everything that you do. But the adventures, Cor, don't stop there. I understand that you've got some interesting things lined up on Monday. Is that correct, Cor?
I have, yes. Well, hoping, weather dependent, but it's been such a tough few months in lockdown and not being able to see people and do things. And I'm one of those shielding people as well, being on immune suppressants. But yes, on Sunday and Monday, I'm going to come back with a bang and driving down to Lincoln and going to Wing Walk, hopefully.
Wing Walk. So for those that perhaps don't know what Wing Walk is, tell us all about it. What are you actually going to be doing?
Yeah, I'm going to be strapped to the wing of a plane as it does somersaults and things, and I'm trying not to think terribly much about that. Let's just gloss over the technical parts. Thanks.
and who's convinced you? Was this your idea or was it someone else's idea? Because I hear your mother's involved as well. Is that correct, Cor?
Involved in trying to put me off it, yeah. She's doing everything she can to stop it happening. But my mother's always been like that, and I do feel for mothers. I am a mother. I do feel for the amount of things that I go on to do, and she's terrified. But equally, if I did what my mother told me, I wouldn't have done any of those things. Yep. So there's got to be a happy medium, hasn't there? I'm very sorry, Mum, but this one doesn't take 6 months training, and it doesn't take being away for 2 weeks. Straight down there on the Wing Walk, and hopefully it won't do anything more than just terrify me, and then we'll be back down on earth again.
Yeah, and hopefully another huge chunk of money raised for your charity, Cor, because that's ultimately what it's all about. And in terms of the long-term plans for the charity and perhaps for you, can you give us an idea of what's over the horizon for you beyond the Monday's Wing Walk, of course?
Sure. I think, going into August, I think we can start to look at some outdoor clubs again. We're planning on a bit of a round the country picnic, and and outdoor cycling. Different things, fishing could be done outside. So various ones in trying to get back to what I suppose would be described as normal. But we've also discovered a lot about being online. There's so many clubs and classes that we've put online that now people can go to even when they live in the sticks, even when they couldn't get to our clubs, even when they're too ill to get out the house. Then they can join in now. So a lot of them will carry on as well. So we're really, really pleased we've been able to adapt and adjust through lockdown, and I think that's so important. I'm sure all of your listeners will have hurdles as well, whatever they are. You've just got to be able to work out how you're going to do it, work out how we're going to get through it, and we've done that. I'm really proud to say we've done that through lockdown. So a mixture of getting back out there and meeting again and carrying on doing the online things.
Oh, fantastic. Well, listen, Cor, we've pretty much come to the end of our 12 and a half minutes. Any one of the particular adventures that you've been on, we could talk about in so much detail. But I think more than anything else, Cor, your journey in life has been absolutely inspiring. And how you continue to challenge yourself is one thing, but the support that you provide to everyone else who have perhaps had to deal with an amputation is quite admirable, and a long, worthy list of awards has followed you, and I'm sure there's many, many more to come. But for now, Dr. Cor Hutton, thank you so much indeed. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Well, thank you to Cor Hutton for joining us this afternoon to tell and share her quite inspirational story. We'll make sure that we get all the details for Cor's charity, and I'm sure you'll all join with me in wishing her the very best of luck as she wing walks, hopefully this this Monday, weather permitting. So thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. Please do join me next week when we will explore international opportunities with a specialist in the area who's based out of Washington, DC. Ian Houston will be joining us next week. So make sure you join us then. In the meantime, have a wonderful weekend and be brave.